You will cry.
I've seen pieces of Coco, not the whole thing. And I had a friend visiting me from Philadelphia this weekend, and I told him he hadn't seen Coco either. So maybe we should watch Coco, but we didn't. We ended up just, we hadn't seen each other talking and just acting up and all that kind of stuff. But I still maybe no, I have too much work to do. I was like, maybe tonight I'll watch it before I go to bed. I'm not gonna do that. I'll watch it some other time. Maybe on the weekend I'll watch it. Anyway, great to see you all. I'm still admitting people. People are showing up. Great to see everybody. So today we're going to talk a bit. We're going to do a little bit. Well, I'll figure it out. I'll talk to all of you, see how this goes. Maybe just divide it into 3 groups, depending how many people are here. We have 17. Yeah. Sometimes group work in Zoomlandia does not work too well, but we'll figure it out. So today you all we read the Buddha principle in preparation for today. All of you who submitted your characterizations, I gave you quick comments on them. So good with that. We will talk a bit about we're going to talk a bit about the story, but we'll focus on characterization in this with this work. And then today I'm also going to speak about the essay for fiction, so that we're coming into the close of the fiction. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Normally we go right into the theater section, and then we do the research paper, and then we finish with slam poetry. But I'm going to switch it this year. I decided that what we could do is we're going to go into the research. That'll be the next thing we do, and then we'll move over to theater a little later in November. But next week I want to be able to do that. Next class. I mean, do the finished fiction with the next class. So hold on one quick second. Okay. Mhm. One more second. Let's see how many people are here now. People keep popping up in the waiting room, which is good.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Professor.
Hello. All right. Maybe let's see how the group goes. We'll go. Sometimes just to vary it up, I think of doing group work, but sometimes in Zoom land, when I break it from groups, it doesn't work so well. But let's start the discussion together, and then we'll feel it out. So first, let's begin. So we did hit recording good. So we read the Buddha principles. The second story we've read by Juno Diaz, right? The first one was Alma. And then with the Buddha principle, you'll notice that he, if you read the collection of stories this is from, is called This Is How You Lose Her. And so the character of Junior is a narrator of the stories in the collection. And in the first one, the first one that we read together, you learned about his relationship with Alma, a girlfriend that he had and lost, right? Because that's what he says at the end. This is how you lose her. And we spent quite a bit of time connecting on Junior and his perspective of the world and women. We spoke a little bit about Junot Diaz as well, right? Junot Diaz is a writer, Junot Diaz as a person, mentioned a little bit and shared articles on Junot Diaz and his relationship with women in general and the accusation and then also absolvement he had as well. So, and very often when we read about authors, we talk a little bit about their lives, right? Because I think it gives us insight sometimes into their work. Like when we spoke about Raymond Carver and Cathedral and the fact that his characters drank so much. And then we learned that in his life, he was an alcoholic and fought alcoholism and had to work hard to clean himself up. But that drinking and drinking a lot was something that he did and that came across in his characters. If we look at Junot Diaz, his Dominican heritage and his bilingual existence comes across as well in the stories. And I think also, I mentioned some of the criticism he got, and I think Mabel and other people shared in the last class that it's kind of like sometimes you have this love-hate relationship with him. But on the one hand, you want him to be a hero, but sometimes he's an anti-hero, right? He kind of he's flawed. So we take issue with his flaws, right? So now we land with the Buddha principle, and in it he takes a look at the family, right? Takes a look at family dynamics, right? He's the younger brother. He has an older brother. They live with their mother. There's no father, right? And it's not just older brother, younger brother thing. The older brother, has cancer, and a lot more is going on, right, with that whole dynamic and that side of that family. Like with all the, you could say, as some of you from your description, some of the love that's there with them, and also some of the issues and the problems and the things that may not necessarily be very healthy in terms of how relationships go. But yes, all right. So then before I start the PowerPoint and all that, I wanted to, like, what are some of your impressions? What are some of your thoughts of the story, of the relationships? What did you think? Mabel?
I think that reading this story, my first impression is like, familial ties, and it sounds very familiar, right? Because I'm actually the youngest of three and the only girl, so I have two older brothers.
Wow.
So I'm very familiar with the dynamic of a mother and her oldest son.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that more to Junior's effect, I feel like him being the younger son, that way of how he cares for his mother came to me in reading this, because he restrains himself from responding to certain things because he's more concerned with his mother's well-being, like even when he hid the box of money from his brother, right? But then he finds out like his mom knew that money was going missing and
Right.
stuff like that, so the damage had already been done, but he still felt like he was protecting his mom.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really, the plot twist for me was Buddha,
Right. Okay.
because she was like, I was just like, wow, Buddha, and then her name.
Right.
So I feel like I wasn't expecting her to. I feel like she was a stereotype as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like looking for someone to marry, and then she couldn't even care for him when he got sick. Like that was really crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like she was a stereotype as well. But like I feel like a stereotype gone wrong, because I feel like even when people think of that idea of getting married for papers, like people actually act like they care about each other. Like Buddha didn't even put up a front. Like she was just like, no.
Well, up until she got married, right? until she was sweet. She would, she was trying to, right. And then when she got married, it was like the tables turned, right? Erica, you're saying that you thought she was using him. I mean, that's the idea, right? The idea is that, I mean, that's a portrayal that we knew that Buddha had one goal, right? What was Buddha's goal was to get her papers, right? So as long as she married him, even though as we know, getting married doesn't guarantee the papers, but it's the first, it's a good step, right? But yes, and it's so she was very focused, right? Thanks, Mabel. Cesar, you had your hand up. Caesar.
Yeah, like I didn't like the fact that Buddha was just doing the thing she was doing, like stereotypical, like it was just I didn't, but I liked AKA Flight at us, her,
Yeah.
like how she stepped up and came up when he was sick. And
Mhm.
then for the like the mother, like I understand, like yeah, I understood where she was like coming from, like but I didn't like the fact that she let her son do what he did. Like at the end of the day, you still have to hold ground, and like you can't let him cross boundaries he shouldn't cross. Like how you saying here, taking my hard on earned money. Like I get you sick and all that, but at the end of the day, you still a grown man. You chose to do what you did with without even consulting her, or getting her opinion in it. And the fact that she didn't like food, I would never liked her either. Like she was violent. So I would have definitely made Buddha feel uncomfortable every time she would come around. Like
Right.
definitely. So I agree with her on that.
Yeah, well, so far we're looking at that, right? This is a lot about the dynamics between the characters, right? And all of you are hitting a lot of points, like like Junior is the youngest son, and the youngest son, there's a stereotype. Sometimes they're closer to the parents, right? And usually there's an idea of the younger son getting away with more, the younger child getting away with more than the older siblings. But what were you gonna say?
I have the ending.
Yeah.
Like
So hold the ending for a
what
second.
was oh, okay.
Hold the ending for a second. We'll get to the ending. Because I think, let me check in with the chat. Okay. Don't forget. Okay. So she was using, it's almost as if Rafa was mad at his mother and just continued to act out even as an adult. Okay. Yeah. So we're talking about the younger brother that has this relationship with the mother, right? This sense of protecting her, although he can't really protect her the way she needs to be protected, and she won't be protected, right? Then we talk about Rafa, who has this combination of those of us, I don't know, we could talk about our own family dynamics, right? Whether we're the oldest, whether we're the youngest, whether we're the middle child, or somewhere in between the top and the bottom of those of that family dynamic. But there certainly is a dynamic, right, that happens inside of families, and not always, but I mean, but stereotypically, sometimes there is that. Like, just so you all know, I'm the oldest son, right, and I got two younger sisters. So I understand Rafa. I understand him. I'm not like Rafa, but I understand Rafa because my mom treated me. I got all the special privileges, and I could do whatever I want. And, and they were girls.
Professor, you were the one?
Yeah.
Oh man, professor. No.
But I was the good
But
older brother because I'm the older brother that used his privilege to help his sister.
Let's ask the sisters and see if they think the same.
Yeah, you could ask them. They hated me. When they were little, they'll tell
That's
you.
why.
When they were little, they're like, we hated you. You were so perfect. You got good grades.
I'm
Mommy
the
always said
older
this. Mommy
brother.
said that. But my mom, I'll show you a family story. So my mom would come to me and say, did you see your sister's curtains in the kitchen? They're black curtains. They're ugly. Don't you think they're ugly curtains? And I'd be like, Ma, they're her curtains. Let her do the kind of curtains she wants. My mom would get mad at me because I didn't side with her. That's what I'm talking about, using my. But anyway, going back to Rafa, right? That this idea of the older brother, right? That there's this idea in many family dynamics, whether they're, and it's a lot, it happens a lot in across cultures, right? Of the older brother, if the oldest child is male, there's a certain kind of strength, as opposed to when the oldest child is female, there's almost a responsibility that's given to her, right? So there's that dynamic that sometimes exists. But Diaz is looking at this perspective, right? This idea of this mother who sacrifices herself, right, for her children, for her family. She does this big sacrifice, and she allows the son, she enables him to behave this way. She doesn't, right? And you kind of figure like, why does she keep doing that with them, with that dynamic? Right. So then you've got the mom, you've got Rafa, who's got cancer and is using it and everything else, right, to behave as badly as possible and gets away with it. And there's Junior, who's kind of caught in the middle, trying to help his mother, is afraid of his brother, but wants to help his brother. He's trying to keep the peace, but then he's kind of like, he's a little bit of an underachiever, right? He's smokes pot a lot, and he's like not, tuned in a lot, and he's kind of, he's trying to hold it together, but doesn't really have the tools to do that. And then we mentioned Tammy, and there's also the other women in it. But John, you have your hand raised.
So Junior is kind of conflicting with him, because even though he loved his mom, but he took pride on seeing her work this much around the house after coming from work and not doing anything. So how much love do you have in there? That's one. And then with the mom, it kind of touched me a lot, because as a Hispanic, I kind of struggle the same way, or a lot of parents struggle that way, because we don't have the funds to either, be able to stay home, and as a single parent to be able to provide and give everything that a family needs and still be there and try to guide them the right way. Like she worked in a factory. For me, right there and then, I started thinking they have to wake up early, be there at a certain time, work long hours, and she didn't even notice when her son was missing school and doing all these things that he did. Mm-hmm. So it was very touching, the story, that part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely the sacrifice.
The sacrifice, the tolerance of losing her fear of losing her child. I guess that's why she acted the way she acted, since he was little. Yeah. And miscarrying all the babies that she missed, that she lost. So
yeah, he kind of makes it, that's what the idea of complexity, right? It's like, on the one hand,
he took advantage, definitely.
Yeah, like, we even, like, it's a good point. You started out talking about Junior, right? Like, he talks about, like, he's there for his mother, or he tries to protect her, but then he does this, like, I don't do a damn thing, male privilege, baby, right? That was the line,
yes, right? That was the line.
Privilege, baby, and he's like, I don't do shit. He goes, nothing, excuse me, right? I don't do anything. Like, and mom's gonna just do it. She'll cook, she'll clean, she'll go to work, she'll come back. I don't have to lift a finger, right? So. And
I noticed when she's tired, when she stops for that 1 second, closes her eyes, and then she continues, like she moves on doing everything, and you see that, and doesn't touch you enough for you to do something,
Right, says something about it. Right, Gregory?
Yeah, I have to say, I couldn't stop reading this. I just kept reading, it just kept getting more juicier and juicier, and I was like, oh, I gotta finish this. And but what I loved about this story was that, probably was because I was able to relate with a lot of the behaviors, that the family was doing among themselves. I mean, I just saw it as a dysfunctional, loving family. I mean, that's how I describe it. Because there was so much dysfunction, so much disrespect, and so much not really being there for each other at a certain point. And, especially the mother, working in a factory, she takes care of all the business, and I mean, all the finance and the house chores and nothing like that. And then you have the two sons who are just doing their thing. But what I loved almost at the end is that when someone from an outsider comes into this dysfunctional family and tries to disrupt it, then you see all the love, how it just starts building. The mother becomes more outspoken, and she just was not tolerating any outsider to come and disrupt her family, and how she became so protective over Rafa, right? The
Yeah.
oldest son. Yeah. And but then she also stood her grounds because he crossed the line already,
Yeah.
And she says, okay, that's enough. And that surprised me of her because I didn't think that she would do that. And I think this the youngest brother thought, oh, this is not gonna last too long. He's gonna come back and stuff. She's gonna ask him to come back. And I was waiting for that. But she stood her ground, and it just reminded me of my family also, especially my mom. There's she can tolerate a lot, unfortunately, but when it gets to a certain point, then she puts her foot down. But when she puts her foot down, it's like King Kong putting his foot down on the ground. It's like there's no turning back. And I really enjoyed the story. It was well written also.
Mabel, and one can share more.
I just wanted to like elaborate a little bit about Rafa, because I felt like the things that he, like his behaviors, it was like he was almost upset, like his mom needed to put up with the things that he was doing. And like he continued to like push boundaries and like sort of to like what Greg was saying, like, and I also like just feel like moms generally, I don't know if it's like the process of being pregnant and then having to push out a kid, like our tolerance is really, really high. And I also wanted to allude to the fact of like, I feel like, yes, many families endure things like this, but I also wonder if that dynamic of like, I feel like sometimes in the Caribbean, mothers like, for the males, and maybe it's because I'm a girl, right? Like I'm a woman, but I think that for men in the Caribbean, like the moms coddle them a lot. And I think that I wonder sometimes, like, was it just that Rafa had cancer, or before Rafa's cancer, was this a behavior of hers? Because yes, Rafa had cancer, but Rafa was also out drinking and partying and gallivanting, in his own way. So I wonder if that was a factor, because it seemed like in the beginning when Junior is talking about the dynamics in the household, he's talking about like everybody está en su lado, like Rafa's doing this, mom is having her meetings with her, I forgot what the horsemen, whatever, the horse ladies, horse faces is like, and then and he's like in his world. So it's also like, is Junior alluding to the fact that like he's still this developing youth and no one's really paying mind because everyone is their own world. So I wonder sometimes about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it says a lot. I mean, also I talk about that. There's a sense that you could, in a way, the idea with stereotypes, right, is that not that they're untrue, but that they're incomplete. In a way, there's a lot. I think we can, regardless of where you live, where you grew up, there's probably a lot inside of this family that you can relate to. So maybe we immediately start making those parallels. I'm the oldest, I'm the youngest, I'm this. My mom sacrifices. Sometimes it's the dad that's kind of does more of the sacrificing. But there is a parent that always is sacrificing themselves, staying up late, working two jobs. Particularly that's the story of it's a working class and immigrant story, right? Because I think we may be rich in ideas and culture and desire, but maybe we're not rich in the resources we have to fulfill all those things. So so then we work hard to try to get those things because we want better lives for ourselves and better lives for our children, and we want to keep advancing. So all of that is wrapped up inside of this family, right? The mother's sacrifice, Junior's trying to figure out like what to do. Rafa is on another planet, right? Because he's just doing his own living life with the ridiculousness of both using the illness for his privilege and all the other privilege that he gets with his family. I want to look at the text a little bit, and so because we're thinking about characterization, and so those of you who and you don't even have to speak Spanish, but you could see that when authors very often name their characters, is not random half the time. There's probably could be some meaning. Sometimes they're symbolic characters, but sometimes they use name. So Rafa, I don't know, maybe that was a name of his brother or somebody in his family, and Junior, but it's interesting that he calls, he calls, in the other one, he called the woman Alma, right? Alma, which means soul, right? He called her soul. And in this one, he has own called Pura, right? And Pura means what?
Pure.
Pure, right? So it's kind of, is he being ironic when he's using the name Pure, or is there something pure about her that she, Johnny's like, no, irony. Don't try to say anything else, Professor. But
Don't try to fix it.
but
she portrays herself.
she's
she
very
portrays
pure and
herself
focused on what she wants, right? What were you saying?
She portrays herself in the beginning like she's like this real innocent and
On the
polite.
campo, like he
and-
tried putting
yeah.
that, like in the campo, you're innocent. The people that come from the country, it's like, yeah, but she had her
Oh, did
her
she?
card under the sleeve.
She knew
Right?
what she wanted.
In the piece when we meet her and the story, it's on page 6, right? And he talks about, he goes, remember that Spanish chick that was crying of him at the yarn barn? That he says, Pura was her name, Pura Adames. Pura mierda was what mommy called her, right? So he's talking about, like, he's kind of playing with that. I want to read the very beginning of the story, and then I want to go to the climax and the ending, and then we'll go through a PowerPoint that I to make sure that we hit some of the points. So the opening, and I'll just share my screen. We'll do that. I'll share the screen so I could so you all see it. Because as you're thinking about the possibilities of different essays, so if you just even look at the first, if you just look at the first paragraph, right? So remember in the last class, we were talking about Junot Díaz using the shock of representation, right? That he uses curse words and sex and all these things to kind of shock the reader, try to get the reader's attention, to shake us up. And he also mixes like language, like Spanish and English, and not only like Spanish and English, but like kind of like hood rap, like we're hanging out in a corner and he's talking to his fellas, right? So here's the story. It goes, those last months, no way of wrapping it pretty or pretending otherwise. Rafa estaba jodido, like Rafa was screwed, right? But then it was only me and mommy taking care of him, and we didn't know what the fuck to do, what the fuck to say. So we just said nothing. My mom wasn't the effusive type anyway. She had one of those Event Horizon personalities. Event Horizon's like a cult, right? So kind of like he's trying to say like she can't really tell what she's feeling. Shit just fell into her and you never really knew what she felt about it. She just seemed to take it, never gave anything off, not light, not heat, crinkled her eyes, maybe, or frowned, but that was it. Me, I would have wanted to talk, even if I wouldn't have wanted to talk, even if she had been game. The few times my boys at school tried bringing it up, I'd flipped. I told them to mind their own fucking business, to get out of my face. I was 17 and a half, smoking so much bud that if I had remembered an hour from any one of those days, it would have been a lot. So in the first paragraph, he does a lot in that first paragraph, right? He introduces you to himself, to his mother, and his brother. All three main characters get introduced right in the beginning. He's playing with the idea of mixing Spanish and all over the place, right? So, but not so much that you are completely lost, but enough that it's very present, right? And then he's using language like, we didn't know what the fuck to do, what the fuck to say. I mean, like, who talks like that? Hopefully you don't talk like that to me, your professors or your family, or whatever. But, you might be joking and talk like that to your friends. So there is this familiarness that he starts developing right in the beginning. So you could look at this story from a lot of lenses, right? We could look at the story like your assignment from characters, right? Characterization. And so the assignment also gave you 3 ways to look at characters. So you can use all those 3 ways to look at every character if you're developing a paper, right? Or you could use one of those ways and develop the characters, but there's different ways. And some of the ways is like who they are. And here he gives some direct characterization. I mean, he says, for Junior, I was 17 and a half, right? That, he goes to high school, that he smokes weed. And then we get the mother, right? The mother is, we know that she is kind of not effusive, that she's, she's not a person that talks a lot about her feelings, right? And that Junior, all we know about Rafa at this point is that he was something was going on with him, so that we know that he was we know what he has, but that he has a sickness, but they said something about him that he's screwed, right? So, and then a few times the friends try to bring it up, they don't want to talk about it, right? He doesn't want to talk about it. So, so just in the first paragraph, right, the opening gives you a lot. But I want to scroll down to, I think it was Gregory who talked about that moment. Here, right? I'm on page 9, right? So it's almost a little more than halfway into the story. That like Rafa and Pura have disappeared. So he reads, on the third night, we were in the apartment just waiting when the monarch pulled up. My mother ran over to the porch, holding the curtains until her knuckles were white. No, she finally said. Rafa stomped in with Pura in tow. He was clearly drunk, and Pura was dressed as if she'd just been at a club. Where have you been, Mommy said. Check it out, Rafa said, holding up both his hands and Pura hands. They had rings on. We got married. It's totally official, Pura said giddily, pulling the license from her purse. Should have seen the expression on my mother's face. It was worse than when my father ran off with his putica. Worse than when the doctor had first said the word leukemia. Her face drained of everything. Is she pregnant? Not yet, Pura said. Is she pregnant? My mother looked straight at my brother. No, Rafa said. I'm going to be moving in, cuñada. Pura went to hug my mother. Let's have a drink, my brother said. My mother stopped Pura with an upraised finger, right? One finger. No one is drinking in my house. I'm having a drink. My brother walked toward the kitchen, but my mother stiff-armed him. Ma, Rafa said, no one is drinking in this house. She pushed Rafa back. If this, she threw her hand in Pura's direction, is how you want to spend the rest, what might be the last months of your life, then Rafael Urbano, I have nothing more to say to you. Please, I would like you and your puta to leave my house, right? So that's the turning point, right? That's one of the climaxes, because suddenly the story does this change from there, right? Like the mother it's been the mother and Rafa, right? And Junior is the narrator. He's telling the story, but really those are the two that are like, that are going at it. And that's the moment where the mother lets him get away with everything, right? But then she kicks him out, right? You could argue that maybe that's not, because then the mother allows him to steal the beds, take the TV, right? Like, you know, all that kind of stuff afterward. But she does make that move that she actually makes him out. And then he says here, and I want you, and this is when she started shrieking out of here. For a second, I thought my brother would have punched every fucking thing that had ever, for a second, I thought my brother, who had punched every fucking thing that had ever crossed him, boys, girls, men, viejos, white boys, moreno, boricuas, Filipinos, chinos, teachers, policemen, but had never in his life put a hand on my mother, was going to pop her. I really did. And for an instant, I think he considered it. But then all the swult went out of him. He put his arm around Pura, who for once looked as if she understood that something was wrong. I'll see you later, Ma, he said. And he got back into the Monarch and drove away. So that was this kind of turning point in the story with the mother, anyway. But because he develops this character of the mother, who ultimately, and many people might say this, right? You know, what is it? There's like even like Charles Manson and Jeffrey Dahmer, I'm trying to think of more recent criminals, had mothers that, you know, still love their sons, even though they had murdered people and, you know, all that kind of stuff. That
Like the recent case we had with the young lady, the laundry family, that they were saying that the mother and the father were hiding the man,
the son,
their
right.
son.
Right, that whole, yes, that story, which is a story, I have issues with that story. Not issues, it's horrible, tragic, you know, but I mean, how did that become like national news anyway? So we know why, but so back to the story. But yes, but there's the kind of lengths that parents go to protect their children. So ultimately, she, even though she has this revelation at this moment, like, you have disrespected me beyond disrespect, and I've reached the point where I cannot have you here, right? So she, and that's like, you know, technically, I don't know how most people feel, but that's even though you could be an older person, there's something like a lot. You never throw your kids out of your house, right? Technically, or you always never deny somebody a plate of food, that kind of thing, right? I don't know if you grew up with those kind of ideas, but we know it happens, right? People get thrown out of their homes for a whole bunch of different reasons. But I want to skip to the end. What time is it? 6:12. Okay, let's skip to the end. And so Cesar had a question about the end. So and then we'll go back. I just want to talk about the ending, right? So so he says, let's see. So Pura disappears, and Rafa has to go to the hospital, right? So and then he says, so you'd have thought Rafa would be at least a little contrite, right? Fat chance. He didn't say a thing about Pura, and not 2 days after he got out of the hospital, I was coming home from the store with a gallon of milk when out of nowhere my face exploded. All the circuits in my brain went out, lights out. No idea how long I was down, but a dream and a half later, I found myself on my knees, my face on fire, holding in my hands, not the milk, but a huge Yale padlock. Wasn't until I made it home and mommy put a compress on the knot under my cheek that I figured it out. Someone had thrown that lock at me. Someone who, when he was still playing baseball for the high school, had his fastball clocked at 93 miles per hour. That's just terrible, Rafa clucked. They could have taken your eye out. Later, when mommy went to bed, he looked at me evenly. Didn't I tell you I was going to fix you? Didn't I? Okay, so that was the ending. Tell me, Cesar, what were you thinking?
I just I was in shock. It's just, and I'm like, what happens next after he does that? Because me personally, if he says something like that and I didn't know who did it, and I would go off. I want to know what happens next.
Yeah, well, you could read the rest of the thing. I don't know. I can't remember. My bell read the story collection on what happens next. I'm looking at my cabinet. I think I left it on.
I don't think he references what happens next, but I feel like the ending to that story, similar to the Alma story, is like we're going back to square one, right? In terms of like, this is like their family dynamic. Like all those things happened. Rafa, he disappeared, he married, he stole from mom. But at the end of the day, we're back home. And even though he's stronger than him, Rafa still got a good hit in.
God, right? Almost takes his eye out. He hits him with a freaking padlock, right? And so I think that's an interesting observation, Mabel, that you're making about this, right? Because in a way, when we talk about characters, like being dynamic characters, remember, those are characters that change, right? And in this case, they're not, right? None of them, they're all kind of almost, not dynamic characters, they're all kind of almost flat characters. Junior is kind of like dazed and kind of always trying to help the family and help the family, but to a certain extent, not really fully. And then he jumps to help his brother, right? But he kind of stays doing the same thing, and probably he'll be pissed at Rafa, but I don't think he'll like throw the padlock back at him, you know what I mean, at some point, or try to do something to get even. Rafa, like is this, what did he do? He used to take women down to the basement and have sex with them, will smoke pot. He would just do whatever the hell he wanted, right? The mother would say, rest, take care of yourself. He's like, I don't care. I'm going to go to job. I'm going to go out. I'm going to hang out. Even he got sicker and sicker and sicker. He never changed right up until the end, right? He marries Pura. She leaves him. He's in the hospital. When he gets out, the first thing he does is get revenge on his brother, right? So, because earlier he was, the brother was too thin, and the other younger one could overtake him and make him go to the hospital. The mother too, right? She doesn't change. The mother like has this moment where she's like, yeah, but then ultimately lets him get away with everything and lets him, bring him back home. And so, do you think that Juno is saying something about the family dynamic? What have you said it? Used a word, but what do you think? What do you think he's saying about families?
I think he's saying family is forever. Like I feel like that's I know like a lot of people contest this sometimes, but I think that based on the story, it's like he's giving us a sense of normalcy, like the almost as if the dysfunctionality of a family is like kosher, like this is what it is, but we still are there for one another,
Mhm,
like some type of level of acceptance.
mhm. April?
Hi. I feel like it's a love-hate relationship. So you're mad at one point, but no matter what, you love them.
Mhm,
And similar to what Mabel just said too, like let's say you guys are so mad at each other, but if something happens to your sibling or your mother, you're quick to be there and like, who touched you? Who said what? You're quick to have their back.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Tolerance.
Mhm,
Is tolerance between the dynamic, the big dynamic between them I believe it's just tolerance. Because nobody's perfect. At the end of the day, we all have to take each other's, right?
Yeah, well, a question, I would challenge that, right? Because I think that no, I'm saying you're right, Johanny, because I think there is that. And I think if you listen to what Mabel said and what April said, that there's a certain amount of taking of the shit that we're supposed to do, right?
Mhm.
We're supposed
And
to-
actually, that was the sermon from church this week, and so that's why I'm speaking out of that, because that was what it was about. It's love, and what is love? It's tolerance, and it's like you get tested every day when it comes to your family and the people you have around you, and how much are you willing to take of that?
Mhm. Well, I think, that is a good question, right? Like how
And
much
even
you-
in relationships.
right, let's
Yeah,
go-
with the people you have around you, that's pretty much it. At work, everything, everywhere. If you see it, that's just the way it is.
Mhm. And at the same time, right, I think we understand that. But I think it's really interesting. I think when you bring it into family, right, and sometimes it happens with friends, with best friends, like literally today, a really good friend of mine called me, and he had a bunch of our friends up at his house for the weekend, and he said, "Oh, I have to talk to you, this drama." Because somebody wanted to stay longer, and he was just like, "No, I kind of need my space," and it became this thing, this drawing of the line, right? And so it's interesting to think of um, the things that we allow to happen inside of families, right? The tolerance, as Connie says, and and my
Or lack of boundaries.
right. And I think it's so interesting because I think when I read this story, it almost gives me like, of course, I could laugh along with it and I could relate to things and I could say I'm the consentido in my house, I can do that kind of stuff. But like for me too, but also I think what Juno does, it kind of highlights this. It's almost like showing us in all the flaws. And I think in seeing a flaw in the story or seeing a flaw in a character, that we have the opportunity to say, all right, let's just shrug our shoulders, that's just the way it is. Or it could take us a moment to think, right? And what if we challenged that dynamic? Where do those rules come from? There's a phrase Spanish that is related to women, particularly women in marriages, right? And it means to aguantar, right? That we have to swap, they have to take it, right? Say it again?
Oveja mansa la oveja mansa that's the one.
Say it. What is it? I don't know.
La oveja mansa se mama su teta y también la ajena.
Right. There you go. Okay. I don't know what you have to explain all that, but but I think something was in there. But the idea is like that you're expected to take it, right? That you're expected to do that. And I think that's not a good expectation, right? It's not healthy, right? One of you, I think
It's not sustainable.
Well, I mean, we talked about the dysfunction, right? Somebody used that word, the dysfunction in the family, right? And in this family in particular, it's heightened, right? It's a heightened sense of dysfunction. And it doesn't serve the mother, it doesn't serve Yunia, certainly doesn't serve Rafa, right? But yet it perpetuates. And so I think some part of highlighting this dysfunction, makes us question at least if there's another possibility. Could there be something else that we could do, inside of family, inside of relationships, so that we're not always aguantando, we're not always taking it, swallowing it, like swallowing the anger and swallowing.
This is me sometimes.
Say it again. That is you.
This is me sometimes because it happens in my family. Like my mom, she always give too much attention to my older brother. I'm the youngest one, the little one. I'm a twin, and he doesn't need so many attentions, and she always worrying about him, like in everything. And if something happens, she's there. Something happened to me, oh, you could so like okay, she's gonna be fine.
Mhm.
And sometimes I me aguanto, but I have one day that
Yeah.
listen, mommy, this is the
That's,
reality, and it's hard.
mhm,
When I read that story, just it touched me. Okay, this is me. I
mhm.
don't like sometimes to talk about it, but I don't know why that thing happens with the oldest in the family. Always one that is the preferido, that they always, there for that person. And
Mhm.
when you need them, so there's nobody for you because you could do. I believe it because I always been so independent, but we need that, that love, that they are there for you also when something happens, not only for the oldest one.
Right.
Can I tell her something, Professor?
Sure.
Because that's,
And then my man and somebody else.
I think I saw that, and you probably correct me if I'm wrong. I think the mother in the story, she felt that Junior was able to take care of himself because he was not sick, and he felt that he was stronger for
Right.
him to do that.
I think
So I think sometimes
I
parents,
think,
that's what they see.
that's the rationalization. But
yeah,
sometimes maybe Magdalene had to become stronger and she had to become independent because of the skewed attention to the older brother. So what is she gonna do? Be like, gimme, gimme, gimme. She's like, oh wait,
yeah,
I've
and
done enough
so,
gimme. I gotta figure this shit out. Right.
and then they think that, oh, I don't need their love because I can solve my, whatever in my own. But I have to do it. I have to become, strong, and I gotta be like, okay, I could do everything by myself. And but I don't know, just
Yeah. Good. Okay, my bad.
So I was gonna say that actually, when in the beginning of the story, when Junior talks about how he actually didn't want to talk about it, and then you were asking like, what is something that could? I think that that's kind of what Juno might have been alluded to. The fact that had they actually sat down and talked about all the things that were going on in terms of like Rafa's health and why his mom turned to the church so hard, and why is it that Junior finds consolation in like not engaging and like just using drugs. Like I feel like that is what is like in the family dynamic. Sometimes that's what is missing, the a level of communication and openness, because it's like we're so open to lean on each other and cross each other's boundaries, but we're really we sometimes we struggle to lean into the level of discomfort that honesty brings.
Yeah. That's powerful, right? Just to hold that thought, what you said there, right? The level of discomfort that honesty brings, right? But there is that, right?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I don't want to so I'm like the person that my mom relies on. So I'm going on a mom cleanse and she can't handle that. And it's like it would be a lot easier for both of us if I just said, Mom, not right now, please. Like, I need a break from you. But for me to tell my mother that I need a break from her, she's going to be like, what do you need a break from? I'm your mother. So it's like, do I want to feel her wrath, or do I just want to tell her what it is and then I can move forward? But then I don't want to hurt her feelings, right? So it's like, in the family dynamics, like Rafa could have just been like, um, I don't have anything else to do because of my health. And, maybe I need to do stuff with you guys instead of him going out and finding ladies, and the mom maybe invite them to pray. I don't know. But definitely, I think that when he said that in the beginning, I was just like, wow,
Yeah.
Juno be knowing.
Yeah. Right. The not being able to talk about things. And so Gregory, and then I'm going to do a PowerPoint and then we can keep talking.
Okay, I'll be real quick because this has been in my head. When I was reading this story, I was like in my head and I was like, oh my God, Greg, you're being so stereotype. you know, like saying like, this is okay, this is how my family is and all like that. But I also thought about, you know, their behaviors came from somewhere. And when I was reading more of the story, they give a little background of the history. Like with Rafa, you know, she had, like Johanny said, she had 2 miscarriage, and then she had her baby and was able to have that. So you can imagine how overwhelmed she was with that. So I could understand how she spoiled him.
And he almost got kidnapped. It also said that part.
Yeah.
So that fear of losing that baby created that motherly, that overprotective with him specifically.
And then also thinking that he's gonna die from leukemia, that just brought her back probably to like the miscarriage. I can't lose my son, you know, I lost 2 prior to him. And then you have Junior, who's like left behind. Like, you know, the brother could be evil and mean, and so he has this I don't give a, you know, attitude. And then you have the mother, you know, who's a single mom, and the husband left with another woman. So I always, you know, when I read all those little things of the background of their history, I was like, oh, I can understand their behavior now.
Yeah.
So when I said that, it didn't sound like I was being stereotypical, you know, because I was like, oh, you know, there's the roots. Now I know why these behaviors happen, you know.
Yeah.
I try to do that with my own family because, you know, we're not born that way, you know. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think we could because you can see we can keep going with this story, right? I think what the last 3 comments are really trying to look at almost like the cause and effect of the behaviors, right? And how certain things get reinforced, certain behaviors get reinforced and get perpetuated. So but yes, so indulge me for a little bit. I'm gonna just run through a PowerPoint because we are at 6:30 and we got like 15 minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about the next essay. But the thing is to think about before I even show you the if we think of what we talked about right now, right, in this class, and the discussion that you were all having, that we're having together, but you were all basically leading, is one, we've been talking about characters, right? We've been talking about family dynamics, right? We've been talking about like what motivates people to behave certain kinds of ways. We've even taken almost a psychoanalytical or socio-analytical look at these characters, right? And how they interact. And the information and the evidence for that is inside of the stories, right? When you look at all those tiny details, if you just took, you know, looking at the description you all gave of the mother and like why she is so, you know, like lets Rafa get away with so much, the miscarriages, the attempted kidnap, that he has leukemia, the fact that she might lose, that's like a biggest fear of any parent. Every parent says, I never want to bury my child, right? And so she feels that, or lose my child. So she lives with this. And to the point that I'm going to use a word, that it distorts how she behaves, right, toward him. Because in any real situation, you should not let that kid get away with all that crap, you know, basically walk over you. But it distorted how she should behave. Like the idea of what is she a good mother, right? That could be the exploration of an essay. Is she a good mother, right? And you could take a position, yes or no, or yes and no, but you can take a position. Is this mother in the Pura principle a good mother, right? Some of you, even though Pura is not that main character, she's an important character, right? She's one minor character, but she's a minor character who's very pivotal to the story, right? She's actually the title of the story, right? Her name is in the title, right, of the story, the Pura principle, right? So
yeah, she creates the climax.
right. She exacerbates, she pushes the whole situation to that. Yeah, I would love to see this like dramatized, but you know, I just see her face like, I'm moving in, cuñada. Like she's like, one finger. You know?
Like the picture in the story.
Right, yeah.
The mom's picture is like all grumpy, and then she's like, estoy saliendo con la mía.
Right, she's trying to romance him. All right, so let me show you the PowerPoint. on this, and I have to get it on there. I realized I don't have the last one on there either. Let's see, where do I have it? Here, yes. So this has the same tablets from the other one, but let's just go from here. I always get confused between this one. Oh, it's over here. The PowerPoint says something else. This one's present, right? So here, setting, New Jersey, is contemporary 1980s. The characters are Junior, Rafa, the mother, Buddha, Tammy, and the four faces of the apocalypse, right? We have these characters. So you could clearly, you can do a analysis of all the characters, you know, and you can use any of the lenses that I gave you in the assignment. And I put some study questions. I'm going to make us small so we can see the whole screen. Like, what do you think of Junior? How would you describe him? Do you find him sympathetic, exasperating, offensive, or likable, right? The main character. What about Rafa? What do you think of him? Talk about the relationship between the two brothers, and especially how Junior relates to Rafa, right? And what are at least 3 themes in the story? So these study questions are also questions that are prompts that you could use to help shape your essay if you decided you wanted to do something related to this story. The major themes: family conflict, right? Family values, like what's important in the family, family dysfunction, which you all hit, disturbances in the family, and then toxic family dynamics in the family that are not healthy, right? Letting people get away with things, not talking about things, allowing things to go on, aguantando, or swallowing things. So those are some of the major themes in it. Other major things: sibling rivalry, right? How 2 siblings compete for the attention of the mother, compete for success, compete for things, sibling rivalry. Male privilege in general, in a Latino house phone specifically, el consentido, right? The son that is, you know, the kind of the king of the house. Another theme is migration and immigration, like Dominicans who are US citizens and those who are living here without papers, like the difference between those two. And that's Pura was the one who wanted to come, and the rest of the family had already gone through the immigration process, right? The roles of women in particular is another theme. There's the mother, like what's her role? There's Pura, there's Tammy Falco, right? We even talked much about Tammy, I can talk about her in a minute. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, those women, the way he describes them, they're religious women. Another theme is illness and cancer and the effects on the family, and then just family conflict, right? Language, here we go, right? We talked about this as curses, urban street language, bilingual Spanish, writes English and uses words and phrases in Spanish, specifically Dominican expressions, and you know, what effect does all this have? And that's it. So I'm gonna pop the PowerPoint. I'm gonna put the ALMA one in there because I realized I didn't put it in there. Just so you could look at these things as you're planning to do and thinking about what your next essay will be about. We're gonna read I kept flipping the story we're gonna read. I think we're gonna read the Alice Walker story. And then I'll give you an extra credit assignment with the other one. So we'll do that with the Apollo. That's a great story. I'll say Apollo or the What You Pawn by Shari Lee. We'll create another assignment in case any of you want to do that one for later. But for next class, and maybe we'll read a little bit today if we have time, we'll read Everyday Use by Alice Walker. And we'll read that one, I think, because we saw this dynamic between 2 brothers, right? And a mother who favored her brother, and Everyday Use has a similar dynamic. We're going to meet a mother with 2 daughters. And so we're going to see how she treats the 2 different daughters and Everyday Use. And Alice Walker, for those of you who...
Oh, Everyday Use, you said?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Do you know that story?
I do. I've used it at work. Yes, I have.
Okay, good. So, so yeah, we read that story together. And then we'll talk some more, and we can talk about it by itself, but you know, think about the discussion we had today about family dynamics, about sibling rivalry, you know what I mean, about like how does a mother treat one child one way and another a different way. And in that one, there is a different kind of climax that happens with that in that story. So I offer you all of the PowerPoint's going to give you these questions to help you formulate your own your own thesis statement and ways that you can look into a short story. But simply the mechanics are going to be similar to the poetry one, and that be 3 to 4 pages that you will you don't have to use a 5-paragraph essay format, but the 5-paragraph essay gives you a structure. So you can use that, or you can do a different examination, right? Of course, the intro would have a thesis statement. And with some class, I use a thesis sentence. I use the 3rd sentence so that students can really try to focus on making it a sentence and not like 2 or 3 or 4 sentences. But it could be that you could look at any of the stories and explore the themes of the stories. You could look at them in terms of some of the specific elements of fiction, which means that you could look at similar to poetry, like symbolism and how imagery is used in the story. You could look at when I talk about, we talked about, if you remember, our forgiveness, we talked about the arm and all the things the arm symbolizes. And when we did forgiveness, we talked about all the characters. Here we talked about, you can look at this story and look at the role of the women in the story. We didn't talk much about Tammy Falco in the story, but she's a really interesting character. Caesar mentioned her, right? And she was like, there was this connection between her and him. Remember when he was very sick, he would just stand in the house and she would be in the parked car, and then we just stare at each other. There was moments he would go, and when early he was feeling well, he would sit in the car with her. Then we also talk about how he also learned how horribly he treated her, right? He fought with her and dragged her by her hair in a parking lot. And that it was violence, but there was this strange connection. And sometimes it just makes you wonder. But talk about like the way in which Junior is seeing women, right? And wondering. And then those of us who, we all have women in our lives, and some of us are women in this class, right? Like, how do we see ourselves, and how do we see or not see ourselves, or see the other women in our lives inside of these characters, and question their motivation, etc. So there's a lot of ways, like the discussion we had, you can organize it and into an essay. So fiction allows us to do that, right? It allows us to look at the themes, right? And then I listed several of the themes. I think just for every story, there's a PowerPoint. So you can go back and look at them. If you've taken notes, excellent. If not, the PowerPoint serve as just at least bullet points for you to refresh your mind as you're looking at them. I usually say start with a story that you connect with, right? If there's something about forgiveness and relationships that story moved you, that might be a story that you want to use. If it was Cathedral and that crazy kind of annoying character, but then has this beautiful experience, this epiphanic, this epiphany at the end, then maybe that might be one that you might want to look at. Maybe it's a theme, maybe it's how, family dynamics, and you might say, interested in the family dynamics in this story, the family dynamics in the next story that we're going to read, the family dynamics, and I think in Sticks, remember that tiny little story that had family dynamics in them, the father with putting those strange sticks in the yard, and the kids who grew to be as cold as him, so maybe it's family dynamics when you look at how it looks in 3 different stories. So you have options on how you can craft and set it up. I will open up no, I didn't open it. I will open up the discussion board so you can upload your stories. And I believe we said we would have them due on Sunday, the 7th. Right? Is that right? I think so. So I'm gonna, so I'll open up the discussion, and then, and I'll also put up like a handout that describes what I just talked about. So you'll see it. And then if you have any questions on Wednesday, we can follow up on Wednesday with those questions. I do want to say also that I think about 6 of you or 7 of you uploaded your poetry essay revisions. So I'm going to correct those before Wednesday and give them back to you in case you have any questions. You can, we could talk about them before you do your next essay.
Professor, refresh my memory. So what's due 7 November is an essay on a fiction.
It's your fiction essay. So your next formal written essay.
Okay.
And it's gonna, yeah, the way you had the formal poetry essay, now the formal fiction essay.
Okay.
But as we end the section on fiction, which you know, we could extend and keep reading more stories. But I think you've done a great job, I think, actually at really reading these stories and opening them up and unpacking them. So so thanks for that. So we'll read one more story. So for Wednesday, we'll read Everyday Use for this Wednesday. And then your paper will be due on next week, Sunday night. You'll have that paper due. And yes, and then next week, we will begin working on the research paper, the research project paper for the class. And we'll talk about we'll do a handout, we'll talk about it, we'll do on Wednesday of next week, we'll do a library workshop together on how to do research. And then you'll have different topics that you can use, that you can pick from. And it's somewhat, it's really more an exercise in writing and integrating different texts. And then we'll also do a instruction on MLA and text citations, and we're going to talk about formatting. So yeah, so the next couple of weeks we'll be preparing the research paper. And I believe I'm changing the date to it, and it will be due 21st. Yeah, it'll be due the 21st, the research paper. And then we'll go into, before that, we'll spend those 2 weeks, it'll be due. And then that week of the 21st, right before Thanksgiving, we'll go into the play. We'll talk about theater. And then, I mean, our class meets on Wednesday evenings on 5:30. And I plan to be here, but I mean, honestly, so just, let me know, because what we will do if people are coming in. I'm just saying, and just to be honest, I mean, I've had class on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and sometimes people are cooking and getting ready for Thanksgiving. And so, but since we're all home anyway, but you could be distracted. But we'll see it out. I'll make a decision whether we'll keep class or not on that Wednesday night. And that's part of where I want to get the research paper done now, because it's also the research paper is, I think 20% of the grade, which is significant. And so if we get it done by the 21st, that gives me time to grade it. It gives you time to revise it if you need a revision for it. If the semester is over. So that's it. Then we'll do theater, and theater will be like a week or so. And then the last week of class, the last 3 classes will just be us preparing for the final exam.
Professor.
Yes.
I remember that when you had your reading, you said you would send a video of it because some of us were in another class or working.
Oh, yes.
So I was wondering.
Yeah, let me take a look at it and I'll share the link. Thank you for mentioning that. What time is it? Oh, it's 6:05. So I know some of you came, so thank you for coming to that. I know it was super long, but that's part of the process of working on a play. Sometimes when you're working on it, you're just writing and creating, and part of hearing it is the editing process. So I will definitely edit down that. I'll share with all of you. I got there's something called writing residencies when you get to go away and get taken care of, and your big responsibility is to write. So I got one of those, and I'm gonna work on a couple of projects right at the end of the year. It's gonna go into the year, into the new year. So I'll be doing some of those, but I'll share that. No pressure, but any feedback that you would give me would be great. And I was looking for another opportunity to see about, and I'll keep my antenna out in case there's another play that we could see that I can give you to see. So that way, since we won't be able to see one together, I'll show you clips from a play. But anyway, I don't want to keep you any longer. But yes, I'll share that, and then and maybe next Wednesday I'll try to leave a little bit of time so if anybody wants to talk, they can talk to me about what they experienced. Okay. All right. You're such good students, very diligent, and stay here. People not popping out. quickly, but thank you for your time and your attention this evening and your discussion. It took up the class. I was thinking of breaking up into groups, but I said, unless the big group discussion ignites, then we'll stay together as a group. But one of the things I was going to do that was have you each in small groups talk about each character, but you don't need to. You're already beyond that. So thank you. All right, so have a great night. I'll see everybody Wednesday. I'll everyday use is in the box, but I'll send it. I won't get up from this chair. I'll just open it up right now and send the note to everybody so that the students who didn't make it to class tonight, they'll know what's up. Okay. Have a good night. And
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you, Professor.
Good night,
Good night,
Good
Professor.
night,
Good night,
Professor.
everyone.
Thank you. Good night,
Thank you.
everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.